Hello and welcome to the big picture. Ever since the hostilities broke out in Iraq 10 days ago with the Sunni militants marching in and taking charge of towns and cities in north and west Iraq, the situation has got worse. The ISIS and Al-Qaeda inspired group of militants have caused havoc and shockingly, the Iraqi army seem to be succumbing to it and some say are even laying down arms and disappearing. The conflict in Iraq, which has assumed clearly Shia versus Sunni dimensions, is drawing not just neighboring Iran, Syria, Turkey, among others, into the crisis. The United States, which had withdrawn from Iraq after its disastrous adventure, is now under pressure to come to the aid of the beleaguered Iraqi government. In the bargain, one is witnessing similar noises coming from US as well as Iran, which have been daggers drawn for years. So is there some kind of realignment happening in the region, with past enemies now coming to work for a common cause? What would such realignments or new alignments mean to the region as well as globally? Where is Iraq heading? We will discuss all this today with Meera Shankar, former ambassador, Professor A.K. Mahapatra, Center for West Asian Studies, JNU, Colonel Rajeev Agarwal, Research Fellow at the Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis, and Atul Aneja, Associate Editor, Defense and Strategic Affairs at The Hindu, who has also reported from the region for years. Welcome to all of you. Meera Shankar, how do you see the equations in this region changing following what's happening in Iraq?
Well, I think that there's a kind of new balancing of forces, if I may say so, but it's premature to really look at realignments. I think much of the reassessments in terms of relations between the US and countries in the region have become a possibility because of the progress on the nuclear issue with Iran,
right,
as well as a change in government in Iran. And now with the situation in Iraq having deteriorated to such a serious point, I think both sides have an incentive to work together to stabilize the situation in Iraq.
Okay, they have an incentive, Professor Mahapatra, but is this incentive enough? And would all the previous, conflicts which the US and Iran had, would that be coming in the way?
Yes, to an extent. But at the same time, one should not rule out the possibility of the onset of a kind of rapprochement between two erstwhile hostile states, you see. The Iranians have somehow come to recognize that America is no longer an outside power. It's very much within the region since 1991, signing of these separate security treaties with all the GCC countries. And hence, America remains a key player in the region. And the Iranians also at the same time, because of the economic compulsion, because of the domestic political pressure, are also keen to have some kind of understanding with America as regards its new role in the region itself. And at the same time, perhaps, the Iranian government under President Rouhani is trying hard to, come to terms with the regional realities, like where to draw a line between the Sunni faction or the Sunni axis on the one side and the Shia group on the other side. So on the whole, what you find that Iran and America are somehow moving towards a kind of understanding, though real rapprochement, realignment will take some time to take shape. But at the same time, one cannot rule out the possibility of the two countries coming to kind of understanding as regards the problem emanating from Iraq itself, because they are very much interested in stabilizing post-Saddam Iraq and how to get out of this quagmire at the moment, largely marked by the sectarian conflict. That is a major concern, and that's a point of kind of common interest between two countries.
Rajeev, is this the most serious Shia-Sunni conflict we have seen happening in this region for years? Or do you think that the previous one was much bigger than this?
difficult to say as of now whether this is right now the most pronounced or the biggest.
But this is a Shia-Sunni conflict.
Yeah,
is something which cannot be denied anymore.
That cannot be denied without any doubts, and especially because of the very open and bold stance taken by the rival factions. Iran on one hand has said that it is ready to support Iraq in its consolidation as well as starving of the ISIS advance. It has given a statement clearly that it will go to any limits to save the holy shrines of Shia.
Right. Holy Shia shrines in Iraq.
Saudi Arabia has come out yesterday and given an open statement saying that any external intervention should be with caution because it will unravel into a larger regional conflict. So in terms of pronouncements, I would say that this could manifest into one of the most open sectarian conflicts in future. There is, however, one point which I would like to say as far as this present conflict is concerned. As far as Iran and US rapprochement or coming together is concerned, I think this would be only a manifestation of the developments that is going on for last few months.
Few months. Atul, you have been around in that region, you have covered that region, you have been. Do you see this, how do you see this entire conflict? In just 10 days, there is so much happening in Iraq, and the Iraqi army seems to be completely, disintegrating virtually.
Girish, this is a process of evolution was going on behind the scenes.
Right.
In fact, if you look at 2003 invasion by the United States, you have had the weakening of the Iraqi state. The central authority was very weak, and you had a constitution which was divided on ethnic lines. So that Iraqi national identity was undermined to a very great extent, and sectarian and other identities came to the fore. So, socially, the place is fragile, and it was in a way it was entrenched that way because of the kind of weak constitution which was imposed on them through Bremer and other people who came after him. So, as a result of which the divides are very deep within them. The Sunnis felt marginalized. There's an Iran factor and the Shia factor which sort of coalesced. So, you had this going for a while, and now you find a revolt. I do not necessarily see.
You're talking of a revolt in the Iraqi army?
No, I'm talking of a revolt by the Sunnis.
By the Sunnis.
I see it not necessarily as a terrorist kind of a response as has been painted out by the Western media.
IS is being looked as one of the terrorist groups virtually.
No, that may be a terrorist group, but the bulk of the people who have joined are Sunni tribesmen.
Right.
And there is something tactical which they feel. There's a self-interest now which is Nouri al-Maliki, which has brought them together. But it's not a permanent alliance. It's not ideologically that the Sunni tribesmen have been sort of moved to the Al-Qaeda framework.
Okay.
So as a result, there are complexities.
So so you're saying that it's a coalition of convenience as of now.
Yes, and it's a power struggle which is going on within Iraq. That is at the domestic level. Of course, there are external forces which are trying to take advantage of it. And if it spills over into a regional conflict and beyond, then it will have much wider repercussions. But we have not reached that point as of now.
You think they have not reached the point of this going beyond the region?
It would begin the moment the southern parts, the oil-rich, the Shia areas, Basra and all, if these are attacked, that would inevitably bring Iran into the equation.
BG oil refinery. This has been captured by the latest reports are from BG saying that it has been captured and things like that.
Still, that's a refinery.
Right.
But the bulk of the oil is in Basra and areas around it. Now, if that is sort of, in a way, the rebels try and take that will inevitably bring Iran into the equation, and the Saudis will come more deeper into it. So a domestic issue will become regionalized in very quick time.
You think
and if you have US strikes which come, then it becomes international.
Yeah,
because the Russians and the Chinese are not going to keep quiet now with the world changing and unipolarity going out of the window.
Right. Meera, Shankar, this is the US. What are the options before the US? Obama is under tremendous pressure on one side. On the other, his own track record of being anti-war in Iraq and things like that. What kind of a situation is he facing now?
Well, he's facing very difficult choices because economically, the priority for the US has been to focus on reviving and regaining growth momentum.
Right, it is a domestic agenda.
Domestic. And to that effect, to withdraw from foreign entanglements, if you will. So the withdrawal from Iraq, the proposed withdrawal from Afghanistan by 2016, all these were really driven by the US domestic agenda to focus on rebuilding their economic strength. So on the one hand, there are the economic compulsions which would militate against a kind of involvement. And on the other hand, there are pressures that you just can't let the situation deteriorate. So for the moment, the US has announced that they are sending some minimal security forces to help with the security of their embassy and their staff. There's pressure for airstrikes. But, you know, it's something which the US will consider carefully. I'm not sure that these are easy decisions to make.
So there are a lot of conflicting, you know, within America, even in the Senate, you know, even among the Senate and the House, and there is a lot of and the army, the U.S. Army, the defense forces, they are asking him to be more cautious than.
Exactly.
That's very interesting, actually.
Yes, yes.
Actually, they've always been quite cautious, even on Syria.
Right.
Because, you know, I think the lesson from Iraq and Afghanistan has been that it's easy to intervene,
get in,
but
not
it's
to get out.
it's difficult to get out.
Yeah. So Atul, you know, so what do you think the options before US are? Can they remain out of it? Because the pressures are increasing. As you said, they are internationalizing the situation. The Iraqi Prime Minister is appealing to Americans, please come and help us.
Yeah. You know, I would go with Meera that there are a lot of domestic compulsions now. You know, Obama's own ratings going down. So, and if you recall, in Syria, they almost came to airstrikes, but at the last moment withdrew. But on Iraq's situation, I will not be surprised, despite the reservations from Dempsey and company, the military, that they might go for limited strikes. Of course, no boots on the ground. That is not part of the Obama doctrine.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there is a possibility of such a scenario emerging of airstrikes coming, and the possibility also then of Iranians getting involved. I think the larger game plan, I would not agree with this rapprochement theory of Iranians and the Americans coming together, because the divide is viscerally deep. And, you know, if you have nuclear talks are making some progress, but the real test will come the way the Iranians react to the Russians and the Chinese, the equations which build over there.
Right.
Because as I see it, after Ukraine situation and Syria, in fact, with Gaddafi's assassination, this process starts, that a sort of a new Cold War has already begun. And Iranians will have to take, if they take a position which is closer to the Russians and Chinese, I don't think this honeymoon with the budding honeymoon with the Americans is going to last for too long. But Iranians will have to take a call on this.
Rajeev?
Yeah.
The issue is, you know, one, how it will, you know, how all this will develop globally and things like that. But in the region itself, the kind of alignments which are taking place, now you're talking of Saudi Arabia and things. So at what time or what point of time do you think that these other countries will start getting involved? Now, where does Syria stand as of now? Because the Kurds are also having a role to play in what's happening in Iraq.
Yeah, I mean, this is, again, you cannot see it as an isolated war or a conflict happening in Iraq. Already, we have seen how it has developed across from December 2013 when Fallujah and Ramadi were captured and down onwards, down till this situation, as also the, convergence between the operations which have carried out in Syria and now in Iraq. So, you cannot see this Iraqi conflict right now in isolation. It has actually spread across to Syria. Turkey is already involved in it. Iran is already directly involved in this thing. Iraqi government is asking for the US strikes which make it more international and close. So there is no way that you can call it an isolated Iraqi conflict. However, what I would say is that as this conflict progresses, there will be a clear stream of balance which will emerge in times with the coming days. And I see that Iran emerging as one of the biggest players as far as the entire conflict is concerned, whether US rapprochement takes place with Iran or some understanding takes place with Iran, or some kind of strikes take place. I do not foresee an immediate decision on US carrying out airstrike, because that would go back on the entire thing that they have done for last 3 years, starting from the Syrian crisis. So it is going to be a messy situation, and to me, Iran is the most important player right now.
Professor Mahapatra, if Iran is going, the ideological, how much is the ideological element involved in this? Shia and Sunni battle is there, but Atul Aneja thinks that they has a slightly nuanced point of view on this. Syria coming into the conflict, Turkey being involved. How far is this Shia Sunni thing becoming a, is it going to play out only on that lines?
See, sometimes I do fear that the situation obtaining in Iraq today may eventually make this post-Saddam Iraq into another Lebanon of 1980s, riven with the sectarian strife. But at the same time, let me tell you what the predecessor just now mentioned. The whole development in Iraq in the past few weeks should not be seen in isolation of what happened in Syria. See, right from the Syrian crisis from the end of 2011 onwards, led to the sharpening of the sectarian divide in the region. On the one side, you have the Shias, on the other side, the Sunnis, and the both sections being supported by the key regional players. And it so happened, this in a way created space for the Islamist militant groups active across the Euphrates River, bit in the western part of Iraq and eastern part of Syria, particularly ISIL or the ISI, which is also called by the Arabic acronym as the Daesh. They got sufficient support, indirect support, logistical support from the patron. Like Saudi Arabia and Qatar may not say publicly their support for this group, but definitely one cannot rule out the possibility of their support, both logistic and the financial support to the group. See, result is they got emboldened by the kind of support they got from the regional players, and with that they also moved towards Aleppo in the so-called resistance against Assad regime. And even if they began to retreat in the face of the reprisal by the government forces, but they, at the same time, they had already a kind of constituency back at home in Iraq itself. What is the constituency? The constituency is made up of the people completely disenchanted with the post-Saddam political system, particularly Sunnis. The Sunnis not necessarily are oriented toward the Islamists. Many of them never liked this ICL, and before that the Al-Qaeda affiliated group in 2004. But this is a kind of resistance group more cohesive and determined to fight against the present government in Baghdad, represented by Maliki. Because look at the Sunnis, they have been disenfranchised, marginalized politically. Look at the only recent week in April, they were on the demonstration force against a specific rule, the law regarding discrimination and terror. They were repressed, they were detained, they picked up, as the terrorist by the present regime. The result is the Sunnis have been totally isolated. Where do they go?
Okay.
They supported this group because of this.
ISI is, Atul, it is suddenly, is it something which has suddenly emerged, or how has this happened? We had not heard too much. I mean, maybe outside in that region it was heard, but we had not heard about it. Suddenly this group becoming so strong, but it is just they're saying that it's about 20,000 strong rebel group and things like that. How are they getting support from say Saudi Arabia, Qatar and things like that?
There has to be definitely Saudi Arabia. You see, if you have groups of such small numbers, unless there is a state sponsorship or support for them, their shelf life cannot be as long as it is.
Right.
So, but my own suspicion is that this ISIL, it was called earlier, now it's ISIS. This group was a breakaway from mainstream Al-Qaeda, which was Zawahiri and company. Baghdadi is the leader of this. It was a kind of a revolt against that. So if you recall, Zawahiri.
So it's called an extremist group of the Al-Qaeda.
It is ideologically, it's like a franchise. It is taken on the Al-Qaeda line of thinking, but it is not necessarily part of the mainstream.
It's independent.
So that's a difference which we have to. But I don't think it can function the way it is without state sponsorship, and I suspect the Saudis would be funding it and would be behind it. And that brings us to the point about the sectarian divide which you talked about, because if you recall, sectarianism really comes to the fore with the 2006 bombing of the Samara Mosque. And that's where it sort of breaks up and accelerates. And I don't think it was innocent that such a revered site for the Shias was deliberately targeted and sets a dynamic of its own. And then you have state sponsorship coming into it, further accentuates this divide. And then you have King Abdullah of Jordan saying that the Shia crescent is rising in the Middle East. So, you know, there are vested interests here who want to encourage this. I don't think this is indigenous. When I went to Baghdad in 2003, for example, it was the Iraqi national identity which was so strong.
Which was very, as long as Saddam was there, the identity was very strong.
Absolutely, nationalism, the Iraqi nationalism. But, you know, further visits showed that it was fraying so fast. And there is to my mind, there's a deliberate attempt to break it into fragments, because this is typical divide and rule. You fragment a place and then that becomes prized open for your future interventions.
Meera, Shankar, who is doing it? Who are behind it? You know, no, but if you look at it, the motives, who are, I mean, if you are going to divide
we
it.
can speculate.
Well, let me say that when you're looking at the situation in Iraq, you see that it's a gradual process, and you see 2 or 3 conflicts which overlap and have led to this. First, I would say, you know, there's the Arab-Persian conflict, there's the West Asian conflict, because Syria was opened primarily because of West Asia and a desire to change the regime there and have a regime more friendly to Israel. In the process, a lot of extremist groups began to be the beneficiaries of largesse from Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and some of the other Gulf states. And that spilled over also into Iraq. So, and then there's the Shia-Sunni conflict. So you see 3 conflicts in a sense overlapping, to which I would add also the effort initially by the West to isolate Iran over the nuclear issue. So you see that there are 4 or 5 conflicts or developments which overlap and which have generated stress and points of perhaps, not points, I would say deep fault lines in the region.
Okay. Rajeev?
Yeah, you said why did it happen in Iraq and now?
Exactly.
So, it is just that it has caught the attention now, and why?
No, so what has been the role of the countries outside the region?
Yeah. Outside the region, I would say it is more of a intra-regional thing than the outside regional thing, and we have to see 2 sets of very crucial development that have taken place in past few months. Internally, first is the parliamentary elections in Iraq, where Maliki, though he has emerged as the largest party, but could not get a majority. And
no, 1 second, how much you think Al-Maliki's own administration in these last few years has resulted in this kind of a situation?
Yeah.
I want Atul also to, and all of you to.
It is one of the major contributing factors as far as the internal situation in Iraq is concerned. The disenchantment that the Sunnis and the Kurds felt as far as the administration was concerned, the marginalization that was there, was one of the major factors in sort of
sparking off
in the local people as such,
yes,
but not the ISIS as such. Now, when we talk of the ISIS, what is happening right now, we have to take in 2 developments which have happened in the region. And in the region, I come back again to the point of what has happened with respect to Iran. The nuclear talks are going on.
Right.
Iran's president visited Turkey in past 1 week and had talks on not only enhancing trade, but finding a via media on Syria. Iran and Turkey, you know, were not on good terms as far as Syria is concerned. Iran surprisingly welcomed the election of Al-Sisi as the Egyptian president, whereas Iran was cross as far as Egypt was concerned when Muslim Brotherhood was ousted.
Right.
So, all in all, if you see, Iran is a resurgent power in the region, and that does not go well as far as the balance of power is concerned. So, what I feel, Iraq is only a manifestation or a playground to the power struggle that is now unfolding in the region, with Iran as a resurgent power and the other regional powers not being comfortable with it, and that is how the ISIS is being boosted to get on with it.
Atul, it's an
It's a
interesting
very interesting
theory.
point. You know, I'll just elaborate on this. Now, look at it, Iran's role in the region. Now, if you look at geographically, if you look at the map, Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon.
Right.
It's all in a contiguous zone. Now, it was here that Iran was the most powerful country, and its influence kept extending into this particular zone. they call it the resistance bloc or whatever word they want to do it. After 2006 Lebanon war, it sort of, when Hezbollah sort of gave a very credible sort of fight to the Israelis, so this further got enhanced.
Right.
So there's a riposte to this which comes, which is an attempt to weaken this alliance or this conglomeration in a way. And the first fault line I thought was Syria, because that gets, then geographically it sort of disintegrates. But I do not think that the West calculated that Bashar al-Assad would last that long. But there's a crucial factor why he did so, because unlike the case of Gaddafi, where the Russians and the Chinese abstained, in this case, in Bashar's case, it was the Chinese and the Russians and the Chinese in that order supported him.
Absolutely.
So that didn't fall. I feel that Iraq is a sequel to Syria, because Syria, you can't do anything now. That story, to my mind, is over. And now you get into Iraq, because the game is ultimately to weaken Iran, which is, again, as Rajeev said, is a resurgent power. So I do not see, despite nuclear talks, the basic script of series of regime changes which is being attempted in this region has been given up by the Americans and the West. And this is another chapter. Iraq is another chapter of this game, which actually you can see starting with Eastern Europe, then 2003 Saddam Hussein being toppled. And
so,
I just like to say just one line here.
Yes,
you see, I just beg to differ from what they described Iran, a resurgent power. Iran also has been a key player, you see, in the entire region. Only the change that you find today is its reassertion has been recognized by the international actor, particularly America, which was ignored before. Before, Iran was considered as the renegade state or revisionist power.
Right.
Now, Iran interests lie in stabilizing region, you see, because it benefits it economically.
Right.
And it is more interested in accommodation than pursuing the policy of confrontation. You understand? In a way, so Iran is getting accommodated in the American scheme of things. Of course, it does involve certain risk of alienating its Sunni allies, particularly Saudi Arabia, and to an extent Israel, the non-Sunni non-Arab actor in the region. But nevertheless, Americans, for the first time, have reciprocated positively to the gesture shown by the Iranian, which was not there before. So that's that's the point of, the major point of difference that we see, and to what extent it will help in resolving this crisis, obtaining in post-Saddam Iraq is difficult to predict at the moment.
So, Meera, sum and substance from all these things, the alignments and realignments are getting more and more complicated, and where it is going to head towards is something very difficult to predict at this point of time.
Yes, I think it's very difficult to predict. It's a very dangerous situation. And for India, I think the implications are quite serious, because we depend for so much of our oil imports on the Gulf. We have a large number of Indians, some say 7 million, working in the Gulf, West Asia, North Africa, and they send home remittances which account for almost more than half of the remittances that we get overall globally.
Right.
So, and then of course, it could be a source of these tensions playing back into our polity.
Exactly.
So I think that there are reasons for India to be concerned, and also to see what kind of role it can play to try to stabilize the situation.
Atul, what kind of role is it playing? Very quickly, we're running out of time.
Not alone. I don't think we can do it alone. If you really look at the crisis which is taking place, oil is a major factor in it.
Right.
The countries affected are India, China, Japan, Korea.
Right.
I think there is a need for a collective action here.
Okay.
And there is a need not to be passive, but to be proactive in trying to preempt these geopolitical tensions.
But we have been quite passive in so far.
I think so. And we are into a crisis management mold rather than having a strategic vision.
So you're saying that India needs to be proactive as things get worse in this region. We'll wait and see how India will react to it. But what is happening there, as Meera Shankar said, is dangerous, and we'll keep a close watch on how it is all developing in the future also. Thanks to all my guests, Prof. Mahapatra, Atul, Aneja, Rajeev Agarwal, and Meera Shankar. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue on the big picture same time tomorrow.